June 1942. A single Soviet tank blocks an entire German division. The Germans are stunned. Their shells bounce off it like pebbles. But do you know what the most insulting part is? The enemy didn't kill this tank. It killed itself. Today we will break down the most brutal technical race in human history. You will see how the Soviet KV-1 transformed from the invincible king of the battlefield into a defenseless target for German Tigers. We will show the moment when Soviet armor cracked and crews had to survive on pure madness and ramming strikes. But the story doesn't end there. You will learn about the answer prepared by Soviet designers, an answer with a caliber of 122 millimeters, which blew the turrets off German heavyweights and punched right through buildings. Secret Wehrmacht reports, fatal engineering errors, and the invisible link between a weld seam in Chelyabinsk and a shot fired in Berlin. Watch to the end to find out why even perfect German mechanisms broke against raw Russian steel. 22 destroyed tanks, 8 armored personnel carriers, dozens of guns crushed by tracks. This is not a line from a medal citation or a propaganda leaflet. This is the bill presented to the Wehrmacht by a single crew over the course of 8 hours of a continuous meat grinder. This is the dry accounting of war, where the currency is armor-piercing slugs and human lives. June 1942. The farmstead of Rososhnaya. The heat is so intense the air shimmers above the armor, distorting the horizon. Dust clogs the nose and throat, grits on the teeth, and settles on the oily streaks of the transmission. At a fork in the road stands a lone KV-1, 47 tons of alloy steel turned into an immobile firing point. Behind it, just a couple of kilometers away, is a field hospital. There are hundreds of wounded men there who cannot run. If the tank retreats, they will simply be crushed by tracks. The crew has no choice. They have only an order, a thick frontal plate, and an ammunition load that must be spent with surgical precision. The tank commander, Lieutenant Volkov, looks through the periscope. The glass is cloudy and scratched, but through it he can clearly see the horizon darkening with German machinery. The 216th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht, reinforced by a tank fist, moves confidently. They march as if on parade, kicking up clouds of gray dust. They do not yet know that this fork in the road will become a graveyard for their ambitions. For them, the lone Soviet tank is an annoying hindrance, a mistake on the map that needs to be erased so they can move on to Stalingrad. Armor piercing. Reference point 2. Range 800. Volkov's voice in the headset sounds muffled, emotionless. This is not the command of a hero. It is the command of a machine operator.
Ready, armor piercing, the loader responds.
The sound of the breech block closing slams like a prison cell door. The first shot tears through the viscous silence of the summer morning. 76 millimeters of steel and explosives smash into the lead German Panzer III. The German tank doesn't explode beautifully like in the movies. It simply shudders, as if it hit an invisible wall, and thick, greasy smoke begins to pour from its hatches. The column stops. The work begins. Hard, dirty, physically exhausting work of destroying machinery. Inside the KV-1, the temperature quickly rises to 40 degrees. The ventilation cannot cope. Gunpowder gases eat at the eyes. There is a taste of copper and burning in the mouth. The loader works like an automaton. The weight of the unitary shell is over 6 kilograms. Lift, ram, recoil. Lift, ram, recoil. And so on, dozens of times in a row. Muscles clog with lactic acid, hands tremble, but the cycle cannot be broken. Stopping the conveyor belt of death means destruction. The Germans recover quickly. They are professionals. Their artillery deploys. Tanks begin a flanking maneuver. Shells start drumming on the armor of the KV. At first, rarely, then like hail on a tin roof. This is where the physics test begins. German 50mm guns, the pride of the Panzerwaffe, turn out to be powerless. The PZGR-39 shell, designed to penetrate light and medium armor, behaves unpredictably when striking the cast turret of the Kliment Voroshilov. It does not pierce the metal. It crumbles into dust, leaving only shallow pockmarks, or ricochets with a screech that bursts eardrums. It is a hammer blow on an anvil. The kinetic energy is colossal, but the force vector is dampened by the thickness and slope of the Soviet steel. "Commander, 2 on the left flank!" The scream of the driver bursts into the airwaves. "I see them! Traverse left! Short stop!" The turret turns slowly. The electric motor of the drive whirs at its limit, fighting the weight of the multi-ton structure. Volkov feels no fear. Fear is a luxury. There is only the calculation of lead time and the monitoring of oil temperature. If the engine overheats, the tank becomes a coffin. The 12-cylinder V2 diesel roars behind the bulkhead, devouring diesel fuel and spewing clouds of blue smoke. Impact. Another impact. Inside the tank, the din is unimaginable. Every time a slug hits the armor, the crew gets a concussion. Blood flows from noses and ears. Heads buzz as if a bell were rung inside them. Vision narrows to the tunnel of the gun sight. But there is no panic. There is anger. The cold, calculated anger of people who understand, as long as the armor holds, they are gods of war. German infantry tries to get closer to throw grenades at the engine compartment. Volkov switches to the machine gun. The DT-29 spits lead in long bursts, cutting the grey figures away from the machine. The tank spins in place, crushing anti-tank guns with its tracks as the Germans roll them out for direct fire in desperation. The crunch of gun carriages and human bones is not heard over the roar of the motor, but it is felt through the vibration of the hull. By noon, the battle turns into a monotonous slaughter. A smoking pile of scrap metal lies before the tank. The Germans bring 105mm howitzers into the fight. High explosive shells do not penetrate the armor, but they sweep away external equipment. They tear off spare parts boxes, smash headlights, bend fenders. The sights are misaligned, the periscopes shattered. Volkov fires by sighting through the gun barrel while loading, opening the breech. It is a violation of all instructions, but instructions are written in offices, and survival happens here. "Shells!" the loader rasps. 5 high explosive left!
Hit the tracks. We'll ram them,
Volkov commands. The driver, whose hands can no longer uncurl from the levers, throws the 47-ton behemoth forward. The KV-1 accelerates. It is the inertia of a falling cliff. A German Panzer IV tries to back up, but it is too late. Impact. The screech of tearing metal drowns out even the artillery cannonade. The KV crashes into the enemy's side, crushing the suspension, turning the complex German mechanism into a pile of junk. 8 hours. 8 hours of continuous combat. When silence falls, it seems louder than the gunshots. The Germans are retreating. They do not understand what they have encountered. By their calculations, there should be a fortified battery here, a pillbox, a line of defense. They do not believe that a single machine stopped them. Volkov opens the hatch. Fresh air, mixed with the smell of burning, hits his face like smelling salts. He struggles to climb onto the turret. His legs won't hold him. He looks at the armor of his tank. It looks like a lunar landscape. There is not a clean spot left. Dents, chips, gouges from ricochets. Later, when the repairmen arrive at the battlefield, they will do a count. A scrupulous, technical count. 161 hits. 161 times death knocked on this crew. And 161 times Soviet steel refused to answer. Not a single through penetration. only dense and stuck cores of German shells protruding from the armor like ugly splinters. This is not a miracle. Miracles do not exist. This is the result of the work of technologists who selected the correct composition of alloying additives. This is the result of the work of welders who laid seams without a single microcrack. This is the result of the work of the crew who became part of the machine, its nervous system and brain. Volkov lights a cigarette. His hands shake so much that the match breaks. He looks at the burning carcasses of German tanks.
The hospital has been evacuated. The mission is accomplished.
But he knows this is only the beginning. This was just one day, one battle, and ahead lies Stalingrad. And there, the rules of the game will change. The metal held, but will the people hold when the enemy stops making mistakes? The silence hanging over the intersection at the Rososhnaya farm weighs heavier than the roar of the recent battle. The dust has already settled, revealing a panorama of the graveyard of German ambitions. Amidst the smoking skeletons of panzers and crushed anti-tank guns, it stands. The KV-1. Immobile, dark, frighteningly whole. It is not burning. The turret is not torn off. The tracks are in place. It simply went silent, as if tired of killing. A group of Wehrmacht technical intelligence officers approaches the machine. They walk cautiously, as if approaching a sleeping predator that could wake up at any moment.
In their hands they hold not weapons, but calipers, tape measures, and notebooks. Their task is to conduct an autopsy, to understand why this Russian monster stopped an entire division, why the vaunted German blitzkrieg tactics smashed against this piece of cast iron and steel. An Oberleutnant of the engineering service runs his hand over the armor. The metal is still hot. The rough, coarse cast slope of the turret is pitted with pockmarks. These are traces of hits. The engineers begin to count. 1, 2, 10, 50. Their voices become quieter. Disbelief seeps into them. This is not just statistics. This is a verdict. 161 hits, the officer states dryly, closing his notebook. Not a single penetration. 161 shells. 37 millimeters, 50 millimeters, even the 75 millimeter stubs of the early Panzer IVs. The entire arsenal available to the Wehrmacht in the summer of 1942 proved useless. German armor-piercing shells, the pinnacle of Krupp's chemical and metallurgical thought, turned into metal splashes, or stuck in the viscous Soviet armor like raisins in a bun. One of the engineers pries out a stuck core with a knife. It is deformed, flattened. The kinetic energy of the impact was monstrous, but the Soviet steel, grade 42S, absorbed it without even cracking. This contradicts all the firing tables these officers studied in military academies. By their calculations, at a range of 500 meters, a 50 millimeter shell should penetrate 60 millimeters of armor. Here, on the KV, there are 75 millimeters, plus the slope, plus the quality of the casting, which the Germans considered primitive. Primitive casting turned out to be stronger than German science. Why did it stop? Asks the senior officer. If we couldn't kill it, why is it standing still? The driver's hatch is open. The engineer climbs inside. It smells of diesel, sweat, and burnt clutch friction. The tightness is incredible. How do Russians fight in these iron boxes? Ergonomics is absent as a class. The levers are stiff. The pedals require the effort of a weightlifter. The engineer inspects the transmission. The verdict is instantaneous and disappointing. The gearbox, a voice sounds hollow from the belly of the tank. The main clutch is burnt out. The gears are destroyed. The engine works, but the tank cannot move.
The German officers look at each other. This is a shock. The machine was not stopped by their guns, not by their tactical genius. It was stopped by its own weight and the imperfection of the transmission. The Soviet tank killed itself with overloads. If not for this breakdown, it could have crushed them further until it ran out of fuel. "This is not a tank," mutters one of the engineers, wiping grease from his glove. "It is a prehistoric monster. Rough, unhewn, but absolutely invulnerable." The inspection report goes up the chain immediately. Teletypes clatter, transmitting dry numbers to the Army Group headquarters, and from there to Berlin. At Hitler's headquarters, this report has the effect of a bombshell. The Führer is furious. The myth of the technical superiority of the Aryan race is bursting at the seams. How is this possible? Untermenschen, Slavs, created a machine that the noble German shell cannot take? The generals make excuses. They speak of a fluke, a single specimen. But the statistics are relentless. KV and T-34 tanks are encountered more and more often. And each time, to destroy them, they have to drag up the 88 anti-aircraft guns, the only thing capable of piercing this hide. But there are few anti-aircraft guns. They are bulky and conspicuous. Tank divisions need their own argument. It is here, at the dusty intersection near Rozhoshnaya, that the strategy of lightning war finally dies. Light tanks, capable of making fast breakthroughs, are no longer kings of the battlefield. They are targets. In Berlin, a decision is made that will change the course of the war. The order is categorical. Germany needs a tiger. A heavy tank capable of carrying an 88mm gun and having armor that the Russians cannot penetrate is needed. The arms race moves to a new level. Now it is not a competition of motors and speeds. It is a battle of armor thickness and gun caliber. German industry gets a kick. The Porsche and Henschel design bureaus switch to a round-the-clock schedule. They need to create a monster that will devour the KV. And at Rozhoshnaya, German soldiers warily bypass the frozen Soviet tank. They take photos in front of it, but there is no triumph in their smiles. There is fear in their eyes. They understand, if the Russians fix the transmission, if they teach this pile of steel to drive reliably, the war will be long and terrible. The inspection is finished. The engineers pack up their tools. They take samples of the armor and the understanding that time is working against them. The tank remains standing as a monument to its own power and its own weakness. Its armor is perfect. Its heart, the V2 engine, is powerful. But its joints, the transmission, failed. This diagnosis, made by the enemy, is already known on the other side of the front. Thousands of kilometers from Rozhoshnaya, in the Urals, completely different people are reading this report. And for them, the word transmission sounds not like a verdict, but like a combat mission. In the offices of the Chelyabinsk tractor plant, the lights do not go out even at night. They know there, the armor held. Now they need to make this metal move without breaking, and this battle will be no less brutal than fighting while encircled. Chelyabinsk, Tankograd. There is no front line on the maps here, no trenches or barbed wire. But the air here smells the same as on the front line, of burnt diesel, red-hot iron, and extreme human tension. A different war is being waged here. A war for microns of tolerance, for percentages of carbon in steel, for seconds on the assembly line. This is the home front that forges victory. But the price of this forging is the human resource, burning out just as fast as fuel in an engine. In the office of the chief designer, Joseph Kotin, the light has not gone out for 3 days. On the table, on top of transmission blueprints, lies that very report from near Rozhoshnaya. The paper is dry, bureaucratic, but the numbers in it scream. 161 hits,
the armor held. This is a triumph of Soviet metallurgy. But next to it lies another document, a summary of complaints about the chassis. Gearboxes break after 100 kilometers of marching. Clutches burn. The heavy KV tank, this invulnerable monster, immobilizes itself.
Nikolai Dukov, the lead designer, nervously breaks a pencil. His face is gray from lack of sleep, his eyes red. He understands the physics of the process better than anyone. We overloaded it, Joseph Yakovlevich. Dukov's voice is hoarse, smoker rough. 47 tons on a transmission designed for 40. The gears can't withstand the torque. We created a fortress on clay feet. We cannot remove armor, Khotin answers harshly. Without doubt. The Germans are preparing new calibers. If we lighten the tank, we sign the crew's death warrant. We need to strengthen the shafts, find new alloys, now. Now in Tankograd means yesterday. There is no time for tests. Any change in the blueprint goes immediately to the shop, into metal. It is a risky experiment where the price of a mistake becomes the life of a crew somewhere near Voronezh or Rostov. In the hull assembly shop, there is a hum that vibrates the concrete floor. The roar of pneumatic hammers, the screech of angle grinders, the roar of overhead cranes. This is a symphony of industrial hell. There is no day or night here. There are only 18-hour shifts. People sleep right by the machines, on boxes of rags, covering themselves with tarps. 18-year-old Vera Ogorodnikova adjusts her mask. Her face is covered in soot. Dark shadows lie under her eyes. She is a welder. In her hands is an electrode holder, a tool on which the integrity of the hull depends. The temperature of the electric arc is 6,000 degrees Celsius. It is a small sun that must be tamed and directed into the joint of armor plates. Vera does not think about heroism. She thinks about the fact that her hands are numb from the weight of the cable, and her stomach is empty. A weld seam is not just joining two pieces of metal. It is tightness. It is strength. If the seam is porous, if the hand wavers and allows a lack of fusion, then upon the impact of a shell, the armor plate will crack along the seam. And then the shockwave will turn the crew into ground meat. "Ogorodnikova! Why the downtime?" the section foreman yells right into her ear, shouting over the noise of the shop. "The electrodes are sticking, Sergei Petrovich. The voltage is jumping." Vera lifts her mask. Instead of eyelashes, there are singed stumps. "Weld as is. The front is not waiting. We have a quota, 30 machines by morning. If you don't meet the quota, I'll cut your rations." This is not cruelty. This is the logic of survival. The foreman knows, if the tanks do not go to loading today, tomorrow a German division will break through the front. Vera lowers her mask. Flash. The arc hisses, molten metal drips into the weld pool. Sparks shower onto her work clothes, burning through the fabric, biting the skin. Burns are a professional mark, like calluses on a digger. The pain dulls. Only the automatic movement remains. Strike the arc, guide the electrode, hold the gap, change the stub. Repeat 1,000 times. The tank here, in the shop, looks different than on the battlefield. It is not a formidable combat vehicle. It is a construction set of thousands of parts that needs to be assembled into a whole. Track links lie in mountains. Each link weighs more than 20 kilograms. Teenagers and women haul them. They strain themselves, blow out their backs, but the conveyor moves. The conveyor belt crawls inexorably, like time. The logistics of Tankograd is a miracle on the verge of collapse. Deliveries of alloying additives fall through. There is no nickel, no molybdenum. Technologists change the armor recipe on the fly, trying to preserve its hardness. Each tank is a compromise between the ideal blueprint and the harsh reality of shortages. Kotin and Dukov go down to the shop. They walk along a row of unfinished machines. The smell of paint and solvent hits the nose. They stop at the transmission compartment of one of the KVs. "Did you reinforce the crankcase?" Kotin asks the foreman. "Yes, sir, and we hardened the second gears with a new scheme, high-frequency currents. They should hold." They should. In this word is all hope. No one knows for sure. There will be no proving ground tests. The proving ground is the front. In the next bay, the turret installation is underway. The multi-ton structure floats in the air on crane cables. The crane operator, sitting under the very ceiling in the gas-filled smoke, filigrees the turret onto the turret ring. An error of a millimeter, and the turret will jam. The tank is an umbilical cord connecting the welder in Chelyabinsk and the gunner in Stalingrad. This connection is material. The energy spent by Vera Ogorodnikova, her burned calories, her lack of sleep, all this is canned in metal, so that later, in battle, it turns into the protection of the crew. Every assembly floor here, in the rear, will echo in blood there, in the west. Shavings in the oil line mean a stalled engine under fire. An under-tightened bolt means a thrown road wheel. By morning, the shop gates open. Clouds of steam burst into the frosty Ural air. The tanks go out into the factory yard. They are not yet painted white. They are dark green, gloomy. Engines sneeze, warming up. Drivers from the factory delivery team drive them onto railway platforms. Loading proceeds at the pace of a forced march. The platforms sag under the weight of the 47-ton machines. The tanks are secured with cables. Vera looks at the departing echelon through the dirty glass of the shop. She has no strength to wave her hand. She just looks at her work. At that very seam, on the left side of turret number 412, she knows that this tank will go where hell is. She does not know the names of the tankers who will sit inside, but she did everything she could. The metal is fused dead tight. The train sounds its whistle and jerks. Wheels clatter on the joints. This rhythm is picked up by the whole country. Metal flows west, to where the Volga makes a bend, and where the fate of the world is being decided. The tanks are going to Stalingrad. Their armor still holds the warmth of the hands of Chelyabinsk workers, but soon it will be made red hot by the flames of urban battles. The race for survival continues, and the stakes in it rise with every kilometer of the way. The home front has made its move. Now it is the front's turn. Now it is the turn of the people who will lead these machines into the corridor of fire. Autumn, 1942, Stalingrad. This is no longer a city with avenues and squares. It is a geometry of ruins drawn by fire and soot. The laws of field regulations do not work here. There is no horizon line here, only broken brick, jutting rebar, and the eye sockets of empty windows from which death looks at the back of your head. Lieutenant Volkov is back in action. Under him is a new, modernized KV-1 with a reinforced transmission. A greeting from Vera Ogorodnikova and thousands of Chelyabinsk workers. But here, in this stone sack, even this machine seems like a clumsy beast driven into a trap. The task is set extremely rigidly. To break a corridor to Colonel Gorokov's group, cut off in the tractor factory area. The distance is only 800 meters, but in Stalingrad, 800 meters is an infinity measured in lives. The tank crawls into a narrow street. The tracks screech on the cobblestones, grinding debris of furniture and glass. The muzzle of the gun looks left, then right, scanning for a target. Here, the enemy is everywhere. In the basement, in the attic,
around the corner. "Driver, stay awake. Keep the revs up," Volkov shouts into the throat microphone.
"Holding, Commander. It's sticky here. Debris!" The driver's voice breaks. The first blow comes from above. German grenadiers on the third floor of a semi-ruined house. A bundle of grenades falls on the transmission compartment. The explosion is dull, but the hull shudders as if the tank was dropped from a height. "Report! Engine is normal. Radiators intact." The driver reacts instantly. The grills on the engine compartment saved them, but this is only the beginning. From an alleyway, a German PaK-40 anti-tank gun strikes. A 75mm shell hits the side of the turret almost point blank. Distance, 30 meters. The ringing is such that the crew's vision goes dark for a second. The armor holds again. But inside, small fragments of spall flake off from the impact, digging into the tankers' faces like shrapnel. "High explosive! Into the alley!" Volkov wipes blood from his eyebrow with his sleeve. The turret does not have time to turn. The driver takes the initiative. He sharply pulls the left lever. The tank, engine roaring, lunges at the wall of the house, covering the sector of fire with itself. The brickwork collapses with the roar of a waterfall. Dust instantly clogs the periscopes. Visibility is 0. "Commander, the gunner is silent!" the loader screams. Volkov turns around. The bow machine gunner radio operator, sitting below, has slid off his seat. A piece of rebar sticks out of his chest, having flown into the vision slit when ramming the wall. Or was it a fragment of armor upon impact? No time to figure it out. "Leave him! Can't help him now! Load!" Inside the tank, it becomes crowded with the presence of death. The smell of blood mixes with the smell of diesel, creating a nauseating cocktail. The crew has shrunk, but the machine's function must be performed. Volkov sits at the machine gun himself, continuing to command. The street is blocked by a barricade. A tramcar filled with sandbags is overturned across the road. Behind it are infantry and machine gun nests. Impossible to go around. To the left is the factory wall. To the right, a burning residential building. "Ram it! Full throttle!" The order sounds like a sentence for the machine. The KV-1 accelerates. 47 tons of steel crash into the tram car. The screech of metal on metal drowns out all sounds of battle. The tram crumples like a cardboard box, flying to the side. The tank rolls over the pile of debris, its nose rearing up, exposing the defenseless belly. At that moment, they are hit from all sides. Shells drum on the belly, on the road wheels, on the turret. This is no longer a firefight. This is a beating. The tank turns into an anvil being beaten by a dozen hammers simultaneously. The lighting bulbs burst. Inside is darkness, cut only by the flashes of their own guns' shots and sparks from outside hits. "Fire! Fire! Fire!" Volkov works like a robot. Shell, casing, shot. Shell, casing, shot. The loader falls to the floor of the fighting compartment. He is not wounded. He simply passed out from carbon monoxide and exhaustion. The fan cannot cope with the powder fumes. Volkov kicks him with his boot. "Get up! Get up, damn you! We haven't made it yet!" The loader, coughing and wheezing, rises. His face is black with soot, his eyes wild. He grabs the next shell. The mechanics of the human body work at the limit, beyond the possible. The tank breaks through the barricade and tumbles out onto a small square in front of the factory shops. They are waiting for them here. 3 German Panzer III tanks stand in a semicircle. Distance, pistol range. Volkov understands. Now they will be shot in the sides. The armor is strong, but not omnipotent. 3 barrels against 1. Driver, snake it! Don't let them aim! The KV begins to jerk, changing direction. The first German shell ricochets off the gun mantlet, going into the sky like a howling comet. Volkov catches the nearest tank in the sight. Shot. The German's turret flies off the ring. The other two open heavy fire. Blows rain down, one after another. Inside the tank, something bursts with a loud hiss. Hot oil splatters on the driver's back. "Oil line pierced! Pressure dropping!" the driver screams. They have minutes before the engine seizes. The tank is dying. But it is still moving. The inertia of the heavy machine carries it forward. Volkov fires the last armor-piercing round at the second German. Miss. The shell grazes the armor, striking a sheaf of sparks. "Ram him," Volkov rasps. The KV crashes into the second German tank, locking tracks with it. Clang, screech, howl of motors. The Soviet tank is heavier. It simply crushes the lighter German machine underneath it, pressing it into the Stalingrad earth. The third German, seeing this madness, begins to back up, hiding in the ruins. The KV engine coughs and stalls. Silence descends instantly, cottony, heavy. Through the ringing in his ears, Volkov hears shouts of "Ura!" from the direction of the factory buildings. They broke through. The corridor is open. Volkov tries to open the hatch. His hands do not obey. His fingers are cramped. They are curled so they cannot grasp the handle. He pushes the hatch with his shoulder. The steel yields. Outside is a gray Stalingrad day. Dust hangs in the air in a dense suspension. Infantrymen in quilted jackets run to the tank. They knock on the armor with rifle butts, shout, hug the tracks. Volkov crawls out onto the armor. He looks at his tank. It is no longer a machine. It is a piece of mangled iron. No fenders, no headlights, no boxes. The entire hull is in deep furrows, as if giant rats had gnawed it. Black oil flows from a hole in the stern, mixing with the mud. Like blood. The driver is pulled out of the mechanic's hatch. He is unconscious. His back is burned by oil. The body of the radio operator is passed to the orderlies. "How many?" asks the approaching infantry captain, nodding at the tank. "More than 100, Volkov answers quietly, looking at the pockmarks from shells. "It took everything on itself. The tank died so that people could pass." Volkov strokes the rough, hot armor of the turret. He feels the metal cooling, giving up its last warmth. The Stalingrad corridor of death has been passed, but there are thousands more such corridors ahead. And for them, new machines and new people will be needed, ready to smelt their lives into victory. While twisted metal cools in Stalingrad, 2,000 kilometers to the west, in the forests near Kummersdorf, there is silence. Here it smells not of burning and decomposing bodies, but of damp pine needles and grease. This is a Wehrmacht proving ground. A laboratory of death, where war is turned into an exact science. There are no emotions here, no cries of the wounded. There is only ballistics, strength of materials, and cold calculation. At the edge of the field, like one sentenced to execution, stands a captured KV-1. It was brought from the Eastern Front. On its turret, over the red star, a white cross is painted. The tank is empty. There is no crew. But the machine still radiates the gloomy power that terrified the Panzerwaffe for 2 years. German engineers patched the old holes, washed off the soot. Now it is simply target number 12, a standard specimen of Soviet heavy armor. Opposite, at a distance of 1,500 meters, camouflaged in a tree line, stands a gun. This is not the usual door knocker of 37mm caliber, and not even a 50mm gun. It is a long, predatory barrel of 88mm caliber. The famous 8.8, an anti-aircraft gun brought down from the heavens to the earth to kill tanks. Now it is mounted not on a carriage, but in the turret of a new steel monster. Oberstleutnant von Stein raises binoculars to his eyes. The Carl Zeiss lenses give a perfectly clear picture. He sees the weld seams on the KV turret, sees the rough texture of the casting. For him, this tank is a symbol of barbarism, a strong but primitive beast that must be learned to be killed with one shot. Range 1,500. Armor piercing, von Stein commands. His voice is calm, mundane, as if he is ordering coffee in a Berlin cafe. The sound of the shot of the 88mm KWK-36 gun is different from anything that sounded on the front before. It is a dry, sharp crack, turning into a rolling roar. The muzzle brake dampens the monstrous recoil, kicking up a cloud of dust. The shell, weighing 10 kilograms, flies at a speed of 800 meters per second. Physics is inexorable. The energy of the impact is such that the air around the trajectory compresses. Impact. Von Stein does not see a ricochet. He does not see a sheaf of sparks going into the sky. He sees a flash right on the frontal plate of the KV. And a second later, smoke pours out of the open hatches of the Soviet tank. Target destroyed. Inspect the result, the officer orders. A group of engineers in clean overalls gets into a Kubelwagen and drives to the target. Von Stein walks first. He approaches the KV and runs a gloved hand along the edges of the hole. It is a perfectly even hole. The edges of the metal are melted. The shell passed through 75mm of steel like a hot knife through butter. It didn't just pierce the armor. It flew inside, retained energy, and smashed the breech of the gun, the ammo rack, and the mannequins simulating the crew. "Look at this, Hermann," von Stein addresses the representative of the Henschel firm. "The myth is destroyed. No more invulnerability. We found the key to their door." The engineer nods, recording data on a clipboard. "Armor thickness is insufficient for our caliber. At ranges up to 2 kilometers, we are guaranteed to destroy the KV. We will punch through the T-34 right through the engine." At that moment, the guest of honor drives out of the hangar. The Tiger, Tank Model 6. 57 tons of German genius. It is huge. Its armor is vertical, without rational slope angles, but its thickness is 100 millimeters in the front. Wide tracks clank, grinding the soil. The Maybach engine runs smoothly, with a low, womb-like rumble. Compared to the squat, streamlined KV, the Tiger looks like a mobile fort, angular, square, suppressing. Inside, space, excellent optics, a steering wheel instead of levers. This is not a tractor for war. This is a limousine of death. Von Stein climbs onto the Tiger's armor. He feels the vibration of the powerful machine. He holds the absolute weapon in his hands. Now the distance of battle changes. The Russians are used to letting Germans within 500 meters to hit for sure. Now they will die without even seeing the enemy. The Tiger can kill from 2 kilometers. This is an execution. This is a safari where the hunter is in complete safety. However, descending inside the shot-up KV for a detailed inspection, von Stein stumbles upon a detail that knocks his arrogance down. He sees an inscription scratched on the inside of the armor, near the driver's seat. Apparently, one of the Russian prisoners left it while the tank was being transported to the rear. "I die, but I do not surrender." Von Stein frowns. He looks at the crude levers, the hard seat,
the lack of ventilation. "We pierced their steel," he says quietly, addressing himself more than the engineers. "But look at this squalor. How do they fight in this? It's cramped, it's hellishly hot. And yet they stopped us for 2 years."
"It is fanaticism, Herr Oberst," the engineer replies. "Technically, the machine is primitive. The welding is rough, the tolerances are huge. Our Tiger is a watch. And this is a sledgehammer. A sledgehammer can break a watch if it hits first," von Stein parries. "We gave the front a long arm. Now the main thing is for the crews to have time to shoot before the Russians go for a ram. Because in close combat, our Tiger is clumsy." In the evening of the same day, a train with new tanks leaves the station. The platforms are reinforced. The weight of the Tiger is exorbitant for standard cars. The tanks are covered with canvas, but the characteristic muzzle brakes stick out, promising a swift reprisal. Germany is betting on quality. One Tiger should be worth 10 KVs. This is the logic of technocrats, who believe that war is an equation that can be solved by increasing caliber and armor thickness. But von Stein, looking after the departing train, feels a strange chill. He remembers the reports. The Russians learn fast. If the KV has become vulnerable, they won't just sit and wait for death. They will come up with something else. The race is not over. It has simply moved to the super heavyweight phase. The era of nightly duels has ended. The era of industrial destruction at maximum distances begins. On the Eastern Front, they do not yet know about the Tiger. Volkov's tankers still believe in their armor. They consider 75mm reliable protection. This is a dangerous illusion. Death is already on the way. It is traveling in railway cars, gleaming with fresh gray paint, and carrying within its belly 88mm of arguments against any Soviet heroism. Soon, very soon, near Leningrad and Kursk, these two worlds will collide. And then it will become clear which is stronger, German optics or Russian fury. The balance of power is broken. The predator has gone out to hunt, and the former king of the battlefield, the KV-1, instantly turned into prey. July 1943. The Kursk salient. Prokhorovka station. The sun is at its zenith, but there is no light. The sky is covered with a black shroud from burning oil and dry earth thrown up to the clouds. Here, on a narrow sector of the front, 2 avalanches of steel have clashed. Thousands of engines roar in unison, creating a low-frequency vibration that makes the diaphragm tremble and noses bleed. This is no longer tactics. This is an industrial meat grinder, where the density of fire exceeds all conceivable limits. Lieutenant Volkov is back in the hatch. His KV-1, a veteran of battles, covered in welding scars and patches, now seems small. Around him, T-34s are burning. They flare up instantly, like matchboxes. Volkov sees the turret of a neighboring tank blown off and thrown 10 meters away. This is not the physics of a random hit working. This is the precise calculation of German gunners working. There is chaos on the airwaves. Screams, swearing, pleas for help, and commands that no one hears. Reference point, tree line, tanks on the right, range 2,000. The observer's voice breaks into a squeal. Volkov presses against the periscope. 2,000 meters. For his 76mm ZIS-5 gun, this is an exorbitant range. He doesn't even see the enemy silhouettes clearly, and from there, from the haze of the horizon, tracers are already flying. Impact. The earth in front of the KV track rears up in a fountain. Shrapnel hammers on the armor. This is not howitzers. This is direct fire. Back! Driver, full reverse, into the ravine!
Volkov yells. His brain, trained by years of war, instantly reconstructs the picture of the world. Before, they were kings. They could drive out into the field, stand and shoot the enemy, taking blows on the armor. Now the rules have changed. The distance of death has shifted. German Tigers and Panthers hit from 1.5 kilometers. Their long-barreled guns stitch through the KV's forehead like paper. The armor that saved them at Rososhnaya is no longer a guarantee of life. Now it is just dead weight preventing them from escaping the blow. "Commander, they see us!" The driver tears at the levers. The tank backs up, breaking bushes. The engine howls at maximum RPM. At that moment, 100 meters to the right, another KV explodes. An 88mm shell went exactly into the gun mantlet. Instant detonation of the ammo rack. The multi-ton machine simply disappears in a fireball. Volkov feels cold sweat running down his back under his salt-crusted jumpsuit. The hunter has become the hunted. Now their only weapon is the folds of the terrain and cunning. Volkov drives the tank into a gully. Here, in the lowland, they are invisible to German long-range guns. But they cannot sit. The Germans are moving forward. "Load subcaliber," Volkov commands. They have only 3 subcaliber shells. Spools, as the tankers call them. Light, with a tungsten core. They can penetrate the Tiger's armor, but only from dagger range. 500 meters. Better, 300. To survive, you need to let death within arm's reach. The crew is silent. They understand. A game of hide-and-seek with death is about to begin. Volkov sees through the bushes the side of the German wedge. Heavy Tigers go in front. Square, confident. They do not maneuver. They don't need to. They just drive and kill everything that moves. "Wait," whispers Volkov. "Wait." His heart beats in his throat. The rumble of German tank tracks approaches. The earth in the ravine shakes. The walls crumble. 800 meters. Too early. At this distance, a KV shell will simply bounce off German cemented steel. 600 meters. The German turns his turret in their direction. Did he spot them? No. The barrel passes by, searching for targets on the hill. 400 meters. Volkov sees the number on the Tiger's side. 310. Sees spare tracks on the turret. Sees the commander in the hatch, looking through binoculars over the heads of the Soviet tankers. "Driver, short burst! Up!" The KV-1 leaps out of the ambush with a roar. It is a jump of desperation. The tank flies out onto the crest of the ravine, exposing its side, but opening a line of fire on the German side. "Fire!" Shot. At a range of 350 meters, the subcaliber shell flies almost in a straight line. It crashes into the side of the Tiger, right behind the road wheels, where the armor is thinner and where the fuel tanks are located. The flash is blinding. The German tank jerks as if stumbling. A pillar of flame 3 stories high bursts from the engine compartment. The gasoline Maybach engine flares up instantly. "Yes, it's burning, the bastard!" The loader shouts, forgetting regulations. "Let's go! Left! Behind the smoke!" Volkov cuts off the joy. They knocked out one, but there are dozens of them here. The turret of the neighboring Tiger is already turning in their direction. The long barrel with the muzzle brake gropes for the victim. Seconds stretch into eternity. The driver throws the KV to the side, using the burning carcass of the knocked-out German as a shield. Explosion. A Tiger shell hits the already dead tank Volkov hid behind. The shockwave hits the ears. Shrapnel of German armor lashes the KV hull. We are alive. Alive for now. The whole day turns into a carousel of horror. Jump out, shoot, leave. Jump out, shoot, leave.
No frontal attacks, only bites from around the corner. The KV-1, created to break through fortified lines, is forced to wage partisan warfare in the middle of an open field. By evening, there is no air left in the tank. The fans circulate hot fumes. The crew is deaf, stupefied by fatigue and constant fear. The driver's hands are rubbed raw and bloody against the levers. He practically hangs on them with his whole body. When the battle dies down, Volkov climbs out onto the turret. The Prokhorovka field is burning. Hundreds of bonfires to the very horizon. Black smoke covers the stars. It smells of burnt meat and melted metal. Volkov looks at his tank. It is covered in dents, but there are no through penetrations. Lucky. Just lucky. Today they outplayed death. They forced an obsolete machine to do the impossible. But Volkov understands. The time of the KV is gone. In this battle, he felt not like he was in a fortress, but in a target. The armor they were proud of in 41, in 42, is now being penetrated. The caliber race, started at Rososhnaya, has led to technology aging faster than people. The battalion commander's Willies stops nearby. "Alive, Volkov?" The major looks at him with red, inflamed eyes. "Alive."
Burned a tiger. "One," the major spits dust. "There are hundreds of them there. Tomorrow they will come again. Prepare the machine. Shells will be brought up in an hour." Volkov nods. A dialogue about victory doesn't happen. There is only fatigue, and the understanding that tomorrow everything will repeat. Look for cover again. Count meters again. Pray again to Vera Ogorodnikova's weld seams, which now must withstand the blow of shells capable of piercing a rail lengthwise. The evolution of war is ruthless. It writes off iron as scrap, but demands that people remain in the ranks. The KV-1 bought time for the country, but its own time ran out on this field, among the black skeletons of burned equipment. Tomorrow will require a new weapon. But for now, the crew collapses, falling asleep right on the cooling armor under the open sky, which continues to glow from fires. Winter, 1944. Armored Forces Assembly Point in the rear. It is quiet here. Shells do not reach here. You don't need to pull your head into your shoulders. But this silence is deceptive. It is the silence of a cemetery and a maternity ward simultaneously. Rows of equipment stand on the snow-covered field. Some machines, black, charred, with torn sides, await smelting. Others, smelling of fresh paint and preservation grease, await crews. Lieutenant, now Captain Volkov, stands by his KV-1, the very one that carried them out of the Stalingrad hell and the Prokhorovka meat grinder. The tank looks like an old, beaten fighter who has run out of strength. The engine has been removed for overhaul. The tracks sag. There is not a clean spot on the armor. A solid map of hits, scars from ricochets, welded patches. This metal is tired. In physics, there is a concept of material fatigue. Microcracks accumulate. The crystal lattice changes. Armor that was impenetrable a year and a half ago has now become brittle. But it's not just about metal fatigue. It's about the evolution of death. In the design bureaus, in the offices of Khotin and Dukov, they understood long ago, the time of Kliment Voroshilov is gone. The caliber race, started by the Germans with their Tigers and Panthers, made the KV concept obsolete. 76 millimeters of its gun are pinpricks for the new German Cat. The KV armor, standing vertically, without rational slope angles, no longer withstands the blow of 88 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. An answer was needed. And the answer had to be not symmetrical, but overwhelming. Not just a tank was needed, but a battering ram capable of breaking through defenses and tearing turrets off Tigers. On railway platforms, under canvas, stand new machines. Their shapes have changed. The angularity inherent in the KV has disappeared. The turrets have become streamlined, squat. The frontal hull parts are positioned at sharp angles so that shells ricochet. This is the IS-2. Joseph Stalin, second model.
Volkov transfers his things. Map case, headset, captured German flashlight. He runs his hand over the cold armor of the old KV. This is not a farewell to a friend. This is returning a tool to the warehouse. A tool that did its job, became dull, and is no longer suitable for cutting new, harder German steel. "Comrade Captain, accept the apparatus," the military acceptance master shouts. Volkov approaches the new machine. It is huge, but at the same time seems predatory, pressed to the ground. But the main thing is the gun. A long barrel with a massive two-chamber muzzle brake at the end. 122 millimeters. A caliber that used to be mounted only on corps guns and ships. Now this power has been shoved into a tank turret. Nearby, two mechanics are fussing with the gun lock, removing grease. "Look at this breach," one booms, wiping his hands with a rag. "It's a safe, not a breach. Separate loading, projectile separate, casing separate. By the time you throw it in, you'll break a sweat. But when it hits, the German crew will fly out through the exhaust pipe," the second answers, lubricating the guides. 122 millimeters. You can fold houses with a high explosive. And armor-piercing. They say on the proving ground it punched through a panther, tore the turret off the ring, and kept flying. Rate of fire is low, 2 to 3 shots per minute. Where do you need to rush? It's not a machine gun. One shot, one corpse. This isn't a KV where you had to hit 10 times to stun the German. Here, a hit is a sentence. Volkov climbs into the hatch. Inside, it smells different. There is none of that ingrained smell of burning and fear that soaked the KV. It smells of rubber, new leather seats, electricals. There is less space. The huge breech of the D-25 T-gun takes up half the fighting compartment. The ammo load is only 28 rounds. That is small. Every gunner's mistake now costs 3 times as much. But every accurate shot is guaranteed destruction. This is a different philosophy of war. The KV was a fortress created for defense, for holding back, for survival under a hail of blows. The IS-2 is a sword. A heavy, two-handed berserker sword. It was created not to endure, but to kill. Its armor is thicker, but its main protection is its gun. It must destroy the enemy before he has time to aim at vulnerable zones. "Well, you beast," Volkov says quietly, taking the turret drive handles. The electric motor whirs differently, higher, angrier. The turret turns smoothly. In the sight is a crosshair with new range scales. Now he can hit at 2 kilometers. Parity is restored. The German monopoly on long-range combat is over. The crew loads shells. They are heavy. A high-explosive fragmentation grenade weighs 25 kilograms. The loader, a sturdy guy with Siberian roots, grunts, placing them in the racks. "Heavy," he remarks. "But reliable," Volkov cuts off. "Better to strain your back than burn." On the neighboring track, a train is forming. T-34 tanks have also changed. They have new turrets, more spacious, and guns of 85mm caliber. The entire Soviet tank armada is shedding its skin. The technology of 41 and 42 goes into history, into smelting, into training units. The war has crossed the equator. Now the task is not to stop the enemy, but to drive him. drive him all the way to Berlin, and for this, speed and caliber are needed. Volkov gives the command to start. The V2IS engine, souped up with a modified cooling system, roars with a bass. A cloud of blue smoke flies out of the exhaust pipes. The tank jerks and smoothly moves off the platform onto the ground. Wide tracks bite into the frozen earth, leaving deep scars. The old KV remains standing in the row of decommissioned machines. Its hatches are open like empty eye sockets. It looks after its successor. There is no sentimentality. Technology ages faster than people. This is the law of progress, paid for in blood. Volkov's tank died in parts. At the Rososhnaya, its transmission was broken. At Stalingrad, its armor was tormented. At Prokhorovka, it was stripped of its status of invulnerability. But it saved the crew. It fulfilled its function. Now it is the turn of Joseph Stalin. A column of new heavy tanks lines up on the road. They look like a pack of prehistoric lizards clad in armor. Powerful, dangerous, ready to pounce. Volkov closes the hatch. The radio crackles in the headphones. Column, march! The clanking of tracks merges into a single hum. They are going west, to where the German menageries still consider themselves masters of the situation. But they do not yet know that for every tiger, a hunter with a caliber of 122 millimeters has been found. The dialogue of steel and fire will continue, but the arguments of the Soviet side have become weightier. Exactly 16 kilograms of explosives in one shell. The roar inside the IS-2 turret is different from what was in the KV. Here it is denser, thicker. 122 millimeters of the gun create pressure that hits not the ears, but the chest immediately, disrupting the heart rhythm. Captain Volkov is used to this. His body has long become an appendage to the breech, to the sight, to the levers. But in moments of calm, when the diesel switches to idle and the powder fumes slowly crawl into the ventilation, he feels something else. He runs his hand along the inner seam of the turret. The metal here is coarse, rough. The weld bead is not cleaned. It protrudes as an uneven scar. A German engineer would call this a defect. A German tank is licked clean inside, painted with ivory enamel, ergonomic. A Russian tank inside is a cave full of sharp corners and untreated surfaces. But Volkov knows the price of this roughness. Thousands of kilometers away, in the Urals, a shift ends not by a whistle, but by a person falling. Vera Ogorodnikova does not leave the machine. She slides down the wall. Her legs no longer hold her. Purple spots dance in her eyes, bunnies from welding that no shield stops. Her work clothes are burned in a dozen places. Her hands are black from scale and oil. She is 19, but she looks 40. She has no strength to walk to the barracks. She falls asleep right here, in the shop, under the roar of pneumatic hammers, pressing her cheek against a still warm track link. But before falling, she laid a seam. Even without a single pore, without slag inclusions. She could have cut corners. She could have sped up the wire feed. She could have failed to weld the root of the seam. No one would have noticed. The quality control inspectors are people too. They also sleep on their feet. But she didn't do it. Not out of fear of punishment, but out of an animal, visceral understanding. If there is a hole here, then there, in the tank, there will be death. Volkov does not see this, but he feels it. In the battle near Sandomierz, when German King Tigers rolled out for direct fire, it was this invisible communication channel that saved the crew. An 88mm shell hit the cheek of the turret.
The impact was of such force that the observation devices were torn off and the loader flew to the breach, smashing his face to blood. The armor hummed like a bell. According to the laws of physics, cast steel should have cracked. Yield strength, material fatigue, kinetic energy, all equations were against the Soviet tank. But the armor held. Volkov looks at the dent from the inside. The shell did not pass. It got stuck, splashed its energy, but did not break the bond of molecules.
And there is no mysticism in this. This is simple honesty. The honesty of the steel worker who held the melt for an extra 10 minutes to burn out the sulfur. The honesty of the technologist who, risking his head, changed the hardening regime. The honesty of the welder Vera, who guided the electrode with a trembling hand, but did not waver in her will. Alive? Volkov's voice wheezes. Alive, comrade captain. Only my ear is ringing, the driver responds. Volkov understands. They are not fighting alone. In this cramped space packed with shells and diesel, there are not 4 people. Here, invisibly, the entire factory is present. Thousands of people who have never seen a German in a sight hold this armor plate with their shoulders. They prop it up from the inside, not letting it bend. This is that very spiritual armor. German shells are designed to penetrate homogeneous steel. They know Brinell hardness, viscosity, ultimate strength. But they cannot calculate the coefficient of hatred and the coefficient of sacrifice. German technology is a triumph of engineering. It is a cold, flawless mind. The Tiger is made as if it were prepared for an exhibition of achievements. Every part is fitted, every bolt is tightened with a torque wrench. But behind this metal stands only an order and a salary of Reichsmarks. There is no umbilical cord connecting the assembler in Essen and the tanker in Poland. The German worker fears bombings and wants beer. The Soviet worker wants his tank to reach Berlin and crush the vermin that killed his brother. That is the difference. And that is why Volkov, reloading the gun, feels not fear, but the cold fury of responsibility. He has no right to fail those who made this shell. "Armor piercing," he commands. "For Vera! For the Urals!" The loader rams the shell into the breach. The clang of the shutter sounds like a seal. Volkov catches the side of the King Tiger in the crosshairs. He exposed himself, confident in his invulnerability. The German thinks that 150 millimeters of his armor is absolute. He does not know that working against him is not just 122 millimeters of steel. Working against him is a clot of concentrated will of a nation of millions, compressed into the shape of an armor-piercing cap. Shot. The tank jerks back, taking the recoil. The shell goes to the target. A second later, the turret of the German heavyweight flies off the ring. The explosion of the ammo rack blows the German machine apart from the inside. "Got him!" the gunner yells. Volkov wipes sweat from his forehead. His hands are black, oily. He looks at his palms. They are the same as those who stood at the machines. Rough, calloused, working hands. War is hard labor. It is not parades and banners. It is dirt, blood, and sweat mixed in a 1-to-1 ratio. Front and rear have fused into a single mechanism. You cannot separate where the factory conveyor ends and the battlefield begins. The tank is a needle with which the people sew together the fabric of history torn by war. And as long as the thread does not break, as long as the weld seam holds the blow, as long as Volkov finds the strength to pull the trigger, and Vera finds the strength to stand at the machine, this country cannot be broken. In the evening, at a halt, Volkov does not write letters. He has no words left. He just sits on the armor, leaning his back against the turret. The warmth of the engine warms through his jumpsuit. He strokes the rough side of the machine like the side of a living being. "Thank you," he thinks. "Thank you for not cutting corners. Thank you for not falling asleep." Somewhere far away in Chelyabinsk, Vera wakes up from the cold. She has 15 minutes for lunch, boiling water and a piece of bread. Then back to work. She doesn't know that her tank just destroyed a king tiger. She just knows she has to weld. And this silent agreement between them is stronger than any alloy. It is the only thing that cannot be penetrated by caliber 88. Because spirit has no density, it cannot be measured, but it is what takes the blow when the metal is ready to give up. May 1945, Berlin. The air here has the density of concrete. It is a suspension of brick dust, burning, and plaster that does not settle for weeks. The sun breaks through this stench as a dull, sickly spot. Here, in the center of the 1,000-year Reich, ends the great race for survival started 3 years ago in the steppes near Voronezh. Colonel Volkov looks into the commander's periscope of his IS-2. Now he commands a breakthrough regiment, but he goes into this last battle himself. Not out of heroism. He simply has to finish the job. Bring this piece of Ural steel to a logical point. The streets of Berlin are a labyrinth of death. There is nowhere to maneuver here. Wide avenues are blocked by barricades of tramcars and broken stone. Combat ranges have shrunk to a grenade throw. His tank looks strange. Grille screens are welded onto the turret and sides. Ordinary bed springs, pieces of fences, whatever they found. This is not a factory upgrade. This is homemade protection against Faustniks. Berlin is flooded with teenagers and old men with disposable grenade launchers. The cumulative grenade of the Faustpatrone burns through 200 millimeters of armor. Alloy steel and rational slope angles are powerless against it. The only salvation is to force the charge to detonate earlier, on the mesh, so that the molten jet of copper dissipates in the air without reaching the main armor. "Infantry, watch the windows!" Volkov's voice on the air sounds hoarse. He is tired, mortally tired. Automatic riflemen of the landing party walk along the sides of the machine, spraying fire on the floors. A tank without infantry here is a corpse. Infantry without a tank are suicide bombers. A symbiosis forged in blood. Ahead is Königsplatz, the Reichstag, a huge gray building eaten by the pox of war. It is no longer a symbol of power. It is just a very strong pillbox packed with SS fanatics. "Right, second floor!" "Flash!" the gunner yells. Impact. A jet of cumulative charge hits the turret. The bed spring, welded by mechanics back on the Oder, takes the blow. The explosion tears the metal mesh, but the armor holds. Volkov feels the tank shudder. Scale rains down inside. "High explosive! Into the window!" 122 millimeters. A shell weighing 25 kilograms flies into the window opening. The explosion inside the building blows out the facade wall entirely. Floors collapse, burying the grenadier. The IS-2 does not pierce walls. It demolishes them. This is an argument against which the garrison of Berlin has no objections. The tank crawls through the debris. Tracks crunch, grinding fragments of furniture, books, someone's abandoned life. The engine roars, choking on dust. The oil temperature in the transmission is critical, but they cannot stop. Volkov closes his eyes for a second. June 42 floats before his inner gaze. Rososhnaya, yellow grass, heat that melts the horizon, the faces of his first crew. Serega, the driver, burned alive at Kursk. Kolya, the loader, killed by a sniper on the Dnieper. They are all here, in this machine.
They didn't make it, but their fury did. Back then, in 42, they were victims. They snapped back, retreated, died, buying time. Now they are judges, and the sentence they carry in the gun breach is final and not subject to appeal. Target sighted! SPG by the columns! The gunner's report brings him back to reality. At the entrance to the Reichstag, behind sandbags, a German assault gun snaps back, the last snarl of the beast. Armor piercing! From a Holt! The driver slams on the brakes.
The multi-ton behemoth dips its nose and freezes. A second to aim. Shot. Powerful recoil rocks the tank. The casing falls to the floor with a clang. Volkov sees in the sight how the casemate of the German self-propelled gun splits in two. The detonation of the ammo rack blows off the roof and tosses it into the air. Clear! Forward! They roll out onto the square. Hell is all around, shooting from all sides. Tracers draw lines in the gray air. Katyushas are firing direct. But Volkov feels a strange calm. This is the finale. He knows it. The Germans know it too. Their resistance is agony, the convulsions of a dying organism. The IS-2 approaches the steps of the Reichstag. There is nowhere further to go. Stop machine, kill the engine. The engine falls silent. And in the suddenly ensuing silence, which seems louder than the cannonade, one can hear the metal cooling, ticking, cracking. The tank breathes. It is red hot. Heat radiates from the armor like from a furnace.
Volkov opens the hatch with difficulty. It is heavy, as if filled with lead. The colonel climbs out onto the turret. His legs are cottony. He sits on the edge of the hatch, legs dangling inside. Ruins smoke all around. Berlin is defeated. The lair of the beast is destroyed. But there is no joy. There is devastation. A huge black hole inside, burned out by years of war. Infantrymen approach the tank, grimy in torn quilted jackets with wild eyes. They don't shout "Ura!" They simply sit on the steps, on broken columns, on the ground. Someone lights a cigarette with trembling hands. Someone takes out a flask. "Is that it, Comrade Colonel?" a young sergeant asks, looking up at Volkov. "That's it, son." Volkov's voice sounds alien, creaky. "We finished it." Volkov looks at his tank, at the soot-covered muzzle brake, at the screens slashed by shrapnel. This machine is the pinnacle of the evolution of death. It is perfect for killing. But right now, at this minute, it becomes useless. Its work is done. He remembers Vera Ogorodnikova. I wonder, is she still welding back there in Chelyabinsk? Or has the factory whistle already announced the end of the shift? He looks at his hands. They are still trembling. This is not a tremor from fear. It is vibration accumulated over 4 years. The vibration of millions of shots, millions of hammer blows, millions of hearts beating in unison. The price. What a huge price was paid for this view of the ruined dome. Volkov takes out a pack of Belomor Canal, crushes the mouthpiece, strikes a captured lighter. The flame dances in the wind. The silence becomes dense. One can hear an accordion playing somewhere far away. One can hear someone crying among the soldiers. Not from grief, from release. Nerves are giving out. Volkov inhales. Bitter smoke fills his lungs. They survived a race where there were no chances. They smelted fear into armor and fatigue into caliber. The KV-1 at Rososhnaya began this path, taking the first blow. The IS-2 in Berlin put a period, driving the last nail into the coffin of the Third Reich.
The circle has closed. The steel cools. But the people who passed through this fire will never cool down. They will forever remain there, in the sights, in the levers, in the endless roar that will now sound only in their dreams. Our time. Tank Museum. A huge, echoing hangar flooded with cold neon light. It smells of dust, old grease, and a bit of damp concrete here. This smell differs from the smell of a proving ground or a shop. It is the smell of history preserved in peace. There is no bustle here, no shouted commands, no clanging of breeches. Only silence, broken by the steps of rare visitors and the hum of the ventilation system. In the middle of the hall, on a concrete pedestal, stands him, the IS-2. Perhaps the very one that took Berlin, or its twin brother. Under the layer of ceremonial green paint, if you look closely, scars are still visible. Rough weld buildups on the turret, dents on the hull cheeks, painted over but not disappeared. These are not casting defects. These are fingerprints of the era. This is the metal's memory of how they tried to kill it. Next to the tank stands an interactive display. The screen flickers, offering to press the play button. On the black and white recording is an old man. His face is cut with wrinkles like a map of the front line with trenches. There is no free space on his jacket from ribbon bars, but he sits hunched over, placing heavy, knobby hands on his knees. This is Colonel Volkov. The recording was made in the 80s. The voice on the tape is creaky, dull, interrupted by the heavy breathing of a man whose lungs are forever clogged with the soot of 1942. School children often ask me, Volkov says from the screen, was it scary to burn? Did it hurt to lose friends? They wait for beautiful words. They want to hear about heroism, about how we threw ourselves at embrasures shouting, "For the motherland!" And I don't know what to answer them. Because in war, there are no beautiful words. There is only work. Heavy, dirty men's work. And fear. Animal, sticky fear that lives in your guts and doesn't let go for a second. Heroism is not the absence of fear. Heroism is when you do your job despite the fact that your legs won't walk and your hands are shaking. The camera glides over the tank's armor. Now, in the museum's silence, the texture of the metal is especially visible. The cast turret is not just a piece of steel, it is the solidified magma of human effort. Volkov on the screen continues, and his words seem to resonate with the very hull of the machine. The Germans, they were excellent engineers. Their Tiger is a watch, a precise mechanism, comfortable, with excellent optics, with a powerful gun. Technically, they often surpassed us, but they lost. Do you know why? Because their tank was just a machine, a product of the Henschel firm. And our tank was an umbilical cord. The old man on the screen pauses, choosing words. It is difficult for him to talk about high matters. He is used to commands and swearing. An umbilical cord that connected us with home. I sat in the turret near Prokhorovka, and I knew. A girl in Chelyabinsk welded this armor. Maybe the same as my sister. She didn't sleep for days. She starved. She burned her eyes with welding so that this seam wouldn't burst. If I back up, if I miss, if I turn coward, it means I betray her. It means her work goes to waste. We had no right to die just like that. We were obliged to live, to justify their sacrifice in the rear. Here it is, the main formula for victory. It is not in millimeters of caliber and not in the thickness of armor plates. It is in the fact that the front and the rear fused into a single, indivisible organism. You cannot separate the welder at the open hearth furnace and the gunner at the site. These were two hands of one body that fought for survival. The German military machine worked on discipline and calculation. The Soviet machine worked on the superconductivity of fury and responsibility to one another. In the neighboring hall stands a king tiger. It is huge, impressive, beautiful with a predatory, technical beauty. But it is dead. Cold emanates from it. It is a monument to ambition, a monument to technology detached from the truth of life. And the IS-2 seems alive. It is warm. It seems that if you put your ear to the armor, you can hear the hum of the Tankograd shops, the clatter of train wheels, the swearing of mechanics, and the wheezing of the wounded. This tank is a battery of energy of millions of people, which has not discharged even decades later. Metal rusts. Volkov's voice becomes quieter. Time is merciless even to alloy steel. Tracks sag. Engines rot from the inside. In 100 years, only dust will remain of these machines. But there is something that does not rust. It is that alloy that arose between us then. An alloy of steel and spirit. This is the understanding that you are not a unit. You are part of a whole. And as long as this whole holds, we cannot be broken. By any caliber. By any technology. Newsreel footage flickers on the screen. They overlap each other. The face of a grimy tanker climbing out of a hatch in 43 flows smoothly into the face of a woman in a factory kerchief, wiping sweat from her forehead. Sparks from welding turn into flashes of shots. Smoke from factory chimneys mixes with the smoke of fires. The conveyor belt with shell blanks turns into the ammo feed belt in the tank. This is not a metaphor. This is a documentary recording of reality. The tank was simply a tool, a needle with which the people sewed together the fabric of history torn by war. And this seam turned out to be so strong that it holds the world to this day. The screen goes dark. The old man falls silent. Silence again. Only the hum of the ventilation. Visitors, teenagers in trendy sneakers, young couples, stand silently. They look at the tank. Perhaps they do not know the technical specifications. It doesn't matter to them what the muzzle velocity of the BR-471 shell was. It doesn't matter to them how many horsepower the engine produced. But they feel the main thing, the weight, the monstrous weight of what was done. The IS-2 stands motionless. Its barrel with the muzzle brake looks at the wall. The gun is lowered, a sign of peace, but the breech is closed. This is a warning. This is a testament written in a language that requires no translation. The language of steel and fire. Victory is not a holiday with fireworks. Victory is the result of extreme exertion of forces when the impossible becomes the norm. It is labor. Labor that breaks the backs of enemies and burns the hearts of the victors. The light in the hangar flickers and goes out, leaving only emergency lighting. In the gloom, the silhouette of the tank seems like a sleeping beast. It fulfilled its task. It brought the crew to Berlin. It saved the lives of those who later gave birth to children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Those who are standing before it now. History is not in textbooks. History is right here. In these rough weld seams that didn't burst. In this armor that held. And in that silence that ensues after the last shot.